Well, hello, everyone. We just want to welcome you to this podcast, to Reflections of the Father's Heart.
Yes.
And we are here again, and we are just so excited that you are all joining us and that you are all here because we have some very important things to talk about today. And I know that this podcast really has the potential to reach hearts. It really does, because this is a topic, Seth and I were talking before we got on. I've just noticed, I know you have too, Seth, that I think it's been around a long time, but over the past, I'd say several months, I feel like this has come up quite a bit, and it's getting hurt by the church. The things
Mhm.
that can happen to us in church, people representing God or claiming to be speaking on God's behalf that hurt us. And at the same time, sometimes we're bringing in a whole bunch of hurts, and then we're trying to do family with people, and sometimes our filter isn't right because we're coming in with our own hurt. So we're going to talk about both of these.
Yeah.
And I just want you to hear there's no condemnation in this particular podcast, in this journey. We're here to meet you in your journey. I've talked to lots of people who are on their journeys with this. So we're really here to meet you heart to
Yeah.
heart. So
And
thank you,
this,
Seth.
the way we're going to approach it too. Yeah, I'm so pumped for this, Sandy. But the way we're going to approach it is like, usually when we hear about church hurt, it means someone in the congregation that that was hurt, which is that's definitely what we're going to talk about. And I've been a pastor for a long time. And so sometimes when people say church hurt, we also need to interpret that as pastors also get hurt from the church, and sometimes there is misunderstanding and there's twisting of communication from past pain, from past hurt. And so yeah, I'm excited to talk about both sides of this because they're both really important, and it's a real thing. This is a real thing.
Yeah, it is a very real thing, and I've spoken to so many people that have walked through it. I've been through it. I know you've been through it. I've shared in past podcasts about the first church I ever belonged to, and it was this miracle story of getting met on an airplane and coming to this church and studying the Bible and getting baptized and feeling like this is the family I've been longing for. I didn't have connection with my other family. This is the family. And there were a lot of good things that I experienced, but ultimately people that I had known and walked with for many, many years, I watched and was a part of this whole situation where they covered up abuse. They were really dismissing a victim, kind of burying this person. And I saw really good people do things that I just never thought I would see them do. And it became on a big, big scale. And it was so painful. And I remember just crying out to God, and where is the justice? And I don't understand. And why would I be, why would this happen? So the hurt is real. It's very, very real.
Yeah. Yeah, we and I this is what I felt like. For those of you who don't know, Sandy and I have coming up a 2.5 day intensive workshop. And part of my journey of, you know, allowing God to heal me has been to do this intensive that we're going to do, this grief recovery intensive, working on loss, working on grief, conflicting emotions because something has ended or changed. Like that's what happens when there's church pain, when there's church hurt, when it happens on the side of the pastors, it happens on the side of the people, it happens on both sides. And I felt like right out the gate, Sandy, I wanted to talk about our intensive coming up because I've worked for ministries and I have had the best times of my life, the most profound times of my life, the most amazing times of my life. And I've also had some really hard stuff, both as a person serving in a ministry and as a leader in the ministry. Like you can't, when you're open for love, when you're open to receive love, you're also open to be hurt. And the tendency is that we want to put up walls so we don't get hurt again. But the same walls that prevent us from getting hurt also prevent us from getting loved. And so we block love by trying to block pain. And this intensive is really important because I've done this same work with organizations that I've been a part of. And, my first church hurt didn't even come from a church, but it came from my Christian school. And my third grade teacher, I think it was third grade, my Bible teacher as a child, who was my favorite teacher and everyone's favorite teacher, was caught molesting children. And all of a sudden he's gone. And so that was my first introduction to hurt by a Christian leader who teaches the Bible. And it affected my ability to trust men. It affected my ability to trust men who taught the Bible. It affected my ability to receive from God, because how can I trust someone, especially a man, talking about God? Because this is now really scary to me. My friends are abused. My friends are hurt. And I've had that happen more than once, where there's been sexual stuff happen. I mean, it's nothing new, but I've had it personally. Sexual things causing pain in churches, and the tendency is to put the walls up so that you can't hurt me anymore. But now, just my own journey, my own journey. Like from that first story, I realized when doing this work that we do in the intensive, recovering from grief about the end of or change of a familiar thing, like Bible class was really familiar until my teacher's gone and I get this news. I saw, when doing this work, oh my gosh, this has affected my ability to allow men into my life, Christian men who teach the Bible. I've been on guard towards them ever since so much fear was introduced from a man who taught the Bible. And so making sure we're healing from this is really important. And I've done this with that. I've done this work with that Bible teacher. I've done this work with other leaders. I've done this work with organizations as a whole. The work that we do in the intensive, the grief recovery work that we do, can apply to organizations where the relationship has ended. The relationship, the physical relationships ended. Maybe you left the church. Maybe the pastor got caught and kicked out. Maybe the Bible teacher got fired. But the relationship, the physical relationship, is over. You're not sitting in the pew anymore. They're not standing in the pulpit anymore, but the emotional relationship continues. And what needs to be healed is the emotional relationship that got broken, that got damaged, that got injured. Otherwise, we self-protect, not just from pain, from more pain. We self-protect from love. And here's what I've noticed, Sandy. I'll just keep talking a little bit. I've noticed so much with this. I've been in this world for my whole adult life, basically. And I've noticed, like, we maybe we need to cut this. I just told you the cow was sitting right here in the window. And I was looking at the cow and I forgot what I was saying. Good thing we can edit it. And
It's all, yes.
Right
The
now.
cow was looking at you. That's awesome.
The cow is right here in the window.
You can tell Seth lives on a farm. That is great.
What was I was talking about? Oh yeah. So the emotional relationship continues even if the physical relationship ends. Oh, here's what I was going to say. I feel like there's been 2 times in my life where I've had an encounter with God where he's re given me his heart for his church. There's been two major times, and one of them is right now. I actually had a dream a night ago, and it was God restoring. I'm not going to tell you the details of the dream, but it was God restoring my heart for his church and letting me experience his heart for his church. And I could have, without healing, I could have been like, you know what, throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know what, never work in a church again. You know what, never be involved in a church again, because pain, pain, pain. I could have gone that direction, and I've seen so many people do that. But for me, even 2 days ago, I just told my wife about the dream, like, Jesus is giving me back his heart for his church
Mm.
again, because it's really easy to lose that, and it's really easy to give up, and it's really easy to not see how he sees, and it's really easy to let our pain interpret everything that's happening, and we don't want to do that. We want to heal. And so I've done this work with organizations and with people who've hurt me from the church, from Christianity, and this would be a great place to get some healing for that. So I just wanted to drop that in there right as we get started, because I've had to do it. I've had to do it. Otherwise, I wasn't going to be okay.
Totally.
Here's the other thing I was going to say.
Yeah.
This is what I saw. I've also been in churches where, because of my past pain with men who taught the Bible and men who led worship and men who preached the gospel and men who led ministries, I've had a lot of pain there. I've also been moved into ministries where I had to make sure I wasn't seeing my new men, pastors, leaders, through that lens. And when I could do that, when I was healed enough to not see new men, pastors, through that lens, those same men, not same men, but men who preach the Bible and stand in a pulpit, have been the very ones who've brought healing into my life. I can name pastor after pastor after pastor who has been healing to me. I just spent 2 hours with one of them right now, today, where I was just on the phone texting with one 2 to 3 days ago, of like, these men have brought healing to the place where men have caused pain. And that's what the enemy wants to do in this, is to go, you've been hurt by the church, but if the walls are up, like, there are times where we need the similar people to bring healing. Like, I needed pastors, men who taught the Bible, to heal me from the men, the pastors who taught the Bible that hurt me. I needed to have experiences with men who preached the Bible and were healthy and were safe and really loved me. Those are, I needed, you know what I mean? Like, we know God can heal anything. And a lot of times God likes to go, you know what? I'm going to stick you in a new place with a new pastor, with a new man. And if those walls aren't down, I won't receive the healing, because, it's like people in relationships are like, well, I'll never trust a man again. And men are like, well, I'll never trust a woman again. I'm just going to use them from now on. And I'll never trust a woman again because I was hurt by one, and I'll just use them all from now on. And women are like, I'll never trust another man again. And we do all kinds of crazy stuff because we never let a man in. And now we're closed off to the very same. Does that make sense? What I'm
Makes
saying?
a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
Healing from this is really important. Otherwise, we completely abandon the church, and God cares about the church. Jesus died for a church and a bride, and he cares about it. But if we run away from it completely, we may never fully experience, like, wow, there's a safe, loving man who preaches the Bible and has been influential and integral to me being healed from the men who hurt me that preached the Bible. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes really great sense. And I think the healing piece is the most important thing because I feel like the enemy uses the hurts and the things that happen in church to divide us from God and divide us from our faith. And I've spoken with many people, and sometimes there's people in places where they feel like they can never get that back. They can never go back there. And a lot of it's because the pain is so great and they haven't walked through it. And I say this, every time I lead a training, every time I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, you don't understand that unhealed pain affects every area of your life. I just want to speak into women. I know I've spoken to many women, and I've been in situations too where the idea of, well, this is how the marriage is supposed to look, and you're supposed to submit no matter what. And if he's abusive, you're still supposed to submit. That's abuse. Like, let's just be really honest. That's abuse. That's not even biblical, by the way. It's not the heart of the Father. And if that's happened to you, my heart breaks for you. I just want
Yeah,
you to hear it's wrong. It's not
yeah,
okay. At the same time, isn't it so interesting how the marital covenant, the idea of marriage was instituted before the fall? It's this beautiful union that was instituted before the fall. And when you get to the new covenant in the New Testament, it is the one area of our lives where God actually adds language instead of taking it away. All the laws go away. They boil down to, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Marriage becomes this reflection of Christ and the church. It's this great mystery. It takes on this even greater form. And so, of course, the enemy comes after it, and people do really wrong things in the name of God. And I've heard egregious things. And this was also coming on my heart as Seth was speaking, because I feel like same God has really been speaking to me about this a lot too. That, I know that there's been times and seasons where the first church that I went to, and I had great community there, and then all this stuff happened, and I had to walk away. It felt like they were getting to be like, it was not legal what they were doing. And so at the same time, because of using these tools and because of healing, what I was able to do is maintain community with safe believers. I think it's important for us to understand that when we meet together as people, that's the ecclesia, that's a gathering. I've known people to meet in homes, or meet in parks, or meet in other places, coming together and meeting together, and God moving in powerful ways, because that is still the church. And I think that's important for people to realize, because I've had some people say to me, Sandy, at this point, if I walked into a church, I would get sick. I've known people to have panic attacks because they've walked into a church, because we've learned that the church is the institution, but that was not the heart of the Father. The heart
yeah,
of the Father was the church is his people. And for those people, as they're healing, I've said to them, but you can connect with people, like connect with safe people. And what Seth is saying is so true. When people walk away from their faith because of church hurt, they think that by doing that, somehow they're leaving the pain back there. And what they don't realize is that they're taking the pain with them every step of the way. And it's a deep, deep pain. The Bible says that the lonely are set in families. Like God sets the lonely in families. When we come into church in those types of communities, it's like family. And so if we don't heal, it'll affect every area of your life. I just, from my heart to yours, don't allow what people did in the name of God ruin you and God, even if it takes you on a different journey. Like, we're cool if, yeah, I'm meeting with some people right now and we're meeting at a house. Great. Or, you know what? Right now, I can't even talk about that, but I'm on my journey of healing. And because I want to get reconnected with Jesus, because it's not, Jesus didn't do it. God didn't do it. And to Seth's point, I've also been in situations where I've been leading things. And because somebody came in either with past hurt from churches, or a lot of times family hurt that hasn't been, they haven't processed it. Now they're projecting that onto me and coming at me with things that I'm I'm not saying like, I just wanna love you. I've said that to people. I just wanna love you. And they can't even see it
Yeah.
because of the hurt. And what we really want you to understand is number 1, we understand that getting hurt at church is a real thing. Was I had said to Seth before coming on that I come from Satanism. I grew up in Satanism. Satanic systems are top-down militant systems. I've seen churches become very top-down militant institutions, and that's an invitation for the enemy. When there's a top-down system, also when you have a top-down system, the enemy doesn't have to infiltrate very far to infiltrate the church. So that is a very real thing. And at the same time, like Seth said, there are so many people out there that wanna embrace you and wanna love you, and we want to support you in having the life that you were meant to have, not muddied by the things that have happened, and I understand they may be very egregious. I've been through stuff and I've seen it, but I think this is such an important conversation because we wanna offer you something that could really help your heart regardless of where you wanna go with it.
Yeah. Sandy, as you were talking, I was thinking, sometimes we're like, we've been hurt by the institution of church. And so sometimes what happens is we react. Which that's putting up those walls and everything. But sometimes, like, people have said things like, they're so against the organization and the institution and the administration of gathering people that they're just, like, and I'm with you. Like, there are times where it's like, I need to just not go. I need some time. And then, or I need some time, just a small group in my home. But there, like, one thing I think we have to understand too in this journey and process is like, sometimes people are like, well, I'm never going to be a part of an organization again. But what we need to be aware of too is like, well, if we're going to stay in community and stay in family and still be with people, there's times where we're like, hey, we're going to meet at my house at 6:00. And it's like, okay, we just organized this thing. We just administrated this thing. And because I've seen people that are like, we're going to get together, but we're not going to tell anyone where we're meeting or what time we're meeting. And everyone has to ask God. And we're going to ask God, and we're going to trust God that we all show up at the same place, because they're so against the organization, the administration, any kind of leadership saying, here's how we do it. The ecclesia, like, I've had the most ecclesia profound experiences, not in a church, in a house or on the side of a mountain. But sometimes people are like, I've literally heard people say stuff like that where they're like, ask God, he'll tell you where to go, he'll tell you when to go there, and hopefully we all meet at the same place. And it's like, okay, because they're so against any organized anything, not realizing you kind of have to organize, and you kind of have to make a decision, and someone's got to pick a time, and someone's got to pick a location, and people got to drive there, and you got to, like, I don't know, I was just remembering that as you were talking, Sandy. But it's just again, it's a symptom of reaction. It's a symptom of self-protection, and self-protection sometimes is really important. Like, but we can't keep it. We can't keep it.
No.
We can't protect ourselves forever. And otherwise we just end up totally isolated, or we end up in such an echo chamber that we only let people in who are exactly like us. And if they're not exactly like us, we end up trying to make them exactly like us. And now what we don't realize is we may have accidentally become the very thing we were reacting from. I've seen this a lot too, is like, if we don't heal and we react like, wow, they were really controlling, they were trying to make everyone like them, they didn't listen to any other voices, they only wanted yes men, they didn't want anybody to ask a question, they didn't want anyone to challenge anything, and they just kicked everyone out who didn't agree with them. And then we react and we put up those walls, and then we go more and more into isolation, more and more away. And if we have people in our lives, it's too easy to then become, I only want people in my life who fully agree with me about the church, about the organization. I only want people in my life who've also been hurt. Now we don't realize we're bonding by trauma.
Mm.
We're forming bonds from trauma, and we're against the church, and our church is against organized religion. And so we're going to have our ecclesia here without the church, and we're not going to. But then if someone has a differing opinion, it's too easy to start becoming like the very thing. That's what reaction has a tendency to do, is make us become. It's the same. It happens with parenting all the time. I'm not going to be like my parents, and we react and we don't heal. And we either do the exact opposite of them, and that's not healthy, because we're not doing what God has for us. We're doing what they didn't do, or we're doing the opposite of what they did. So they're still controlling how we behave, because we're just not doing what they did. But we're not doing what God did, because we reacted. It happens in families, or we become the very same thing. And we're like, how did we become that thing? Oh, because we focused on what we didn't want so much that we became it. We reacted to what we didn't want so much that we became it, because it's all we thought about, because it filled our hearts and our imaginations to the point where we became the very thing. So that was hopefully that all made sense in there.
Great. It was great. What was coming to me as you were talking is whatever season you end up being led to, whether it's I'm going over to this organization, or I'm meeting with this group over here, I'm meeting in a home over here, if it's being done from a place of I've got all this hurt and I can only see through my hurt, you're not really going to be led to where you may be called. I'm all for, and I think we are all for you doing what you need to do to heal, to feel safe, and all of those things. We definitely understand that, yeah, there's some really challenging things that happen sometimes and really painful. And I've used the word egregious because I've seen it. At the same time, the people that I have seen that have gone on in their lives to thrive after going through those kinds of experiences are the people that chose to heal. They
Yeah.
chose to heal. They chose to heal for themselves. They chose to heal because they didn't want to just completely lose their faith. And then they chose to heal so that they could hear the direction that they needed to be called into. Like
Yeah.
the other thing that was coming to me, and I had just mentioned it a minute ago, is when I think of the battle, right? Like the spiritual battle, and I think about those things. When I think of that, there's a lot of times where we have to remember that the enemy, like again, I come from Satanism, so I have a different perspective on this. You have to understand that in the satanic world, Satanists get points for infiltrating churches. People don't realize that. So you could get somebody that literally is following the enemy, infiltrating the church, getting into a position of leadership, and then harming people and dividing things because they get points. And when I say points, like they get to move up higher in the ranks. And I remember growing up, I had a cousin who I loved dearly, and his father was one of those people. He was a pastor. He was a Satanist. He took me to rituals at night in the basement of the church. Like he was about as far from God as you can imagine, up there preaching fire and brimstone on Sundays. Now, when I look at where I am now, where God is spoken to me, Jesus has walked me through so much healing, and grief recovery has been a huge part of my healing. You all, like it will get in there and release you of things that you never imagined. Interestingly enough, my cousin, he follows the darkness. And you know why he follows the darkness? Because he thinks he's pushing against the religiosity of his father, not realizing that he's actually just following the darkness. You got to understand that's why sometimes the hurt in churches is so egregious, because it is actually from the enemy. That's why we're talking about this, because you have to understand, if you're the enemy, what's the number one place you're going to go? Church. You are. Where are you going to go after God's people? By people that are supposed to be leaders or family. And so this is a burning, burning passion that I have, and I know Seth has, because a lot of times too, when I've seen the really, really destructive stuff, it's either a good person who compromised bit by bit by bit by bit and became something that they didn't recognize.
Never thought they would.
Mhm. Or it's somebody that infiltrated the church with the sole purpose of taking down God's people. Don't let those people ruin what God has for you, is what
Yeah.
I would say.
And Sandy, hearing your story and knowing that, I'm like, whew, yeah. And there's been some really, really horrible stuff done in the name of God. Egregious is the right word for it. And there's a lot of us who haven't had that kind of egregious stuff, but we've had smaller, more, like a lot of paper cuts rather than like a giant stab in the heart. We've had a lot of paper cuts, and those will drain you too and take you out as well. And so, Sandy, I was thinking too, like, I was like, whew, those big ones like that, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. Sometimes I'm almost like, those are way easier to see. And,
Mm.
at some point you're like, oh gosh, it was so obvious. And then, so the egregious ones are there. There's also these small ones that are really also painful. And I think one of the things as you were talking about the enemy's plan, I'm like, I think another one of the enemy's tactics in churches, well, in and relationships all around, one of the enemy's tactics is to put an interpreter in there whose job is to take things out of one person's mouth, interpret them for the other person. So there's misunderstanding, miscommunication, and then to misinterpret what's done in return, and to cause divisions and separations, and I break relationship, break stuff, just break stuff. And I felt like that's one of the things I've seen when people are really healed. They either don't have that interpreter goes away
Yes.
that's interpreting how things are happening. I've had people on staff that I love that have gone, I've seen this before. I've been here before. I know exactly how this is going to go. I know exactly how this is going to go because I've been here before, and they're doing the exact same thing that was done before. And I've gone, hey, it's an interpreter. There's an interpreter interpreting for you what their actions are, what their words are. I don't know if that's really true. Like maybe it's being interpreted, and so healing from the past stuff either removes the interpreter. It will remove the interpreter so you actually hear what people are saying, and it helps you recognize when an interpreter tries to step in, because sometimes it's not the visible Satanist who infiltrates the church. It's an invisible spirit that goes, let me interpret this for you. Oh, that pastor said this. Here's what he means. And you're like, dude, I can't believe the pastor said this. Like, oh, that's not what I said. That's not what I meant. That's how it was interpreted. That's not what I meant. Wow, I could totally see how you heard that. Here's what I meant. And like, oh gosh. Right. And so it's like, but being able to healing makes it so we have authority and power over that interpreter and can recognize when it's trying to come back in. Because sometimes it's not the human who's been sent on assignment into the church. It's an interpreter that's invisible. And that thing causes so much, it's smaller. It's not the abuse in the basement, horrible, atrocious abuse in the basement. It's these little tiny misinterpretations that are like little cut, little cut, little cut, little cut, little cut, little cut. Wow, I'm bleeding out. I'm bleeding out. And it was a bunch of little cuts. But that's what I was thinking. Another element of how the enemy does this is stick a spiritual interpreter in there to make sure I'm still hearing through my old pain instead of what you're actually saying. Whether it's from a person in the congregation to the pastor or the pastor to the congregation, that healing helps us recognize when that thing's trying to come back and removes it so that we hear what's actually being said. And yeah, go ahead.
I think I was just going to say, I think that is so important and so powerful. You know, the Bible talks about the Satan prowls around, right? Like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. He's constantly there. We are in a spiritual battle. We really are. And the other thing that was coming to me as you were talking, Seth, is that another area that I've worked with people is people that have been in cults, whether they, often religious cults. So they're Christian cults, but they're cults. Cults are closed systems. They often believe they're the only way to get to heaven. They often have admonish a lot of control over their people. And as you can imagine, there's a tremendous amount of harm done in that environment. Problematically, though, what I have seen is that if people leave that cult system without walking through healing, it is not uncommon for them to end up in another abusive system. So, this is another reason why healing is so, so important. Whether it's now they're in a different church and maybe that church is abusive, or they're in another environment, or they're in a relationship and now that relationship is abusive.
That's what I was
Because
going to say. It happens, and I married the same guy again. I married the same
yes,
lady again. Like,
yes. Exactly, exactly, and they find themselves or even in their business relationships. I mean, honestly, that happened to me. I didn't know that I had grown up with Satanism for a while. That stuff was buried. I mean, that stuff is horrible. It was buried, and we had an image of a family, so I clung to that image, and so bit by bit, and a lot of times because I so wanted to heal, God even I'm not saying God led me into abuse, but he used it to show me the reason this is familiar is because you've experienced this. We got to heal the root so that you can break free. And it's been layer and layer of that. So if you don't heal from these things, whether they're the big ones or the paper cuts, we have a tendency to unknowingly return to the very thing that's hurting us in a different form if we don't heal. That's why this is so, so important. This 2.5 days has the power to completely change your life.
yeah.
Completely.
And Sandy, sometimes it's not that I returned to the very same type of situation, it's I attracted it.
Good
My
Lord.
wound attracted it. The very same thing. I only returned into it because I attracted it back, because predators like to recognize vulnerable people. And if I'm still vulnerable from a wound, I will attract more predators in my life. Another thing I was going to say, Sandy, like, this is so you brought up the verse, First Peter chapter 5 verse 8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Here's what I want you to hear. If there are people the devil may devour, there must also be people the devil may not devour. He's looking for people he may devour, but there are people the devil prowls around and goes, I got nothing. I cannot access their life. I'll go find someone else. And I want to show you a couple things that are really important here, because we all want to be people that the devil may not devour, because we are in a spiritual war. The verse before this says, 2 verses before, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care or anxieties upon him, for he cares for you. Then it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary. So how do we be sober? How do we be vigilant? How do we become people who he may not devour? Well, it's all dependent on what we do with our anxieties, our cares, our emotions. It's all dependent on what we do with those. The
Mm.
person who actually gets those out, it's the same word, cast all your cares on him. It's the same word for Jesus casting out demons. Like, what we do with those anxieties, those emotions, those cares, those worries, those troubles, what we do with those decides whether or not we're devourable or not. The other thing I was going to say is, and I don't know if I've said this here before or not, but when God cursed the devil in the garden, he said, from now on, you will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And then, however many thousands of years later, or however long it was, a long time later, that same God who cursed the devil to eat dust steps into humanity, grabs a towel, and washes the feet of his disciples. I think that's more profound than we've seen.
Mm.
Washing of the feet is going, every place you've walked through, everything you've walked through, every pile, steaming pile of dookie that you've walked through, all the dirt you've walked through, all the stuff you've walked through, I will wash it off your feet so that you are no longer a source of nourishment for the enemy. And that is a huge part of going, what do I do with these cares? What do I do with these pains? What do I do with these worries? What do I do with these emotions? What do I do with those? Because I want the devil, who's prowling around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, I want him to look at me and go, I can't devour you because you don't have anything I can feed off of. Because you allowed Jesus to wash your feet through all the stuff that you've walked through, all the things you've been through. He washes your feet so the devil has nothing on you. He finds no nourishment in you. And I think, Sandy, that's what healing does. Is healing is spiritual warfare. It's 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 it it's protection. It's true protection. It's God's protection, not self-protection. It's God's walls around you that let love in, and let you heal from pain. Because if you let love in, you're probably going to get hurt again at some point. He's not going to protect you from all pain, but those walls that let love in also bring healing into your life. And healing does that for you. It does actually protect you from a lot of stuff, but it also helps you navigate it when it comes, because this stuff happens. This stuff really happens. And I guess I want to be really clear that I wasn't saying like, you will never get hurt again if you do. No. But you'll know what to do with it when you're healed. You'll know what to do with it if it comes again.
And you'll be able to discern it in the present moment versus it sitting on top of a bunch of stuff that isn't healed. I think that's a misconception that people have too is, well, I got hurt here. So let me just stay away from that so I don't feel hurt anymore. But the truth is, the hurt is within you. And regardless of where you end up or where you decide to go or what you decide to do, that hurt within you is going to filter into every area of your life. And I know I said this before, but this keeps coming to my heart. And I think this is very, very important. What Seth said about the interpreter and the paper cuts, and what I said about the things that are really egregious. Like I said, I've heard them all. I've experienced big things. I've seen the little things. I think it's really, really important to not let what the enemy did take you out of the path that God has for you. Like I said, I've worked with people in very extreme cult situations. I've heard horror stories, horror stories. And I've seen people with the paper cuts too. And what I have found a lot of times and what I've seen is like what I said. I'm not saying that the devil made them do it. I'm not saying people don't have choices. I'm not saying that there aren't consequences for those things. Please don't hear that. But the enemy's agenda is to take you away from God. That is his agenda. That is his main focus. If he can't have your salvation, he's gunning for your purpose and he's going to look to take you off your purpose. healing from what hurt you helps you to stay on purpose. God has a way of weaving those things together. And also helps you because then you can share your story and help other people with your story from a healed place,
Yes.
and that there's power in that. It's like I like to say that if we don't heal, then we don't have an opportunity for a testimony. Healing brings testimony.
Yeah. Sandy, I feel like we could talk about this
I know.
probably for hours.
I know.
And that was my wife texting. I need to leave
It's
in
time to
like
go.
3 minutes to go pick up my boys. I love this conversation. I think it's really important. And it is because we don't want the enemy destroying, keeping people from God, keeping people from each other. We don't want that. We don't want that. And healing is a huge part of it. And so um, I know for me, what God has worked through to heal my pain is people in a similar position to the ones who caused my pain. And that is important for me. That's a huge deal for me. Um, yeah, Sandy, can we wrap it up and
Yes,
close it out?
definitely. Yes, yes, and I
Yeah,
would just say if something pulls your heart, like there is this deep pain in there, I wanna do something about it, do the workshop. It'll change your life. It's so compassionate, it'll hold you in a great space. It'll give you the compassion, the non-judgmental place to walk through whatever is there. So,
and to
just from
be
our heart.
honest about
Yeah,
what's there.
yeah, to be
Yeah,
honest. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there'll definitely be, part 2s and 3s to this conversation because I know it's a lengthy one, but
yeah,
thank you all so much for being with us
yeah,
today, and thank you, Seth, that was amazing.
yeah. Thank you, Sandy. Bye, guys.
Bye.